What's going on there, guys? It's Zojalix here, wanting to come at you with another one of my Lord of the Rings Online new player guides. And for those who don't know, I have been playing Lord of the Rings Online for a little over a year, and I've been trying to do what I can to try and make the game as accessible as possible. So I'm currently working on a series of new player guides to hopefully make the game easier for people who are getting into it for the first time, or maybe stepped away for a long period of time and are coming back and are wanting to know at some of the big differences and changes that are going to be happening within the world of Lord of the Rings Online. My previous new player's guide, I created a video talking about what server you should be playing on, or what server you might want to be playing on. And so that will be linked in the description below. I still haven't quite yet gotten them set up in a way where I maybe will have a playlist. I probably will, not sure yet. But today we're going to be talking about character creation. You have picked which server you were going to be playing on, and now it is the fun choice of creating your character. And if you're like me, you got into Lord of the Rings Online and you probably got horribly overwhelmed with all of the different options that were available between all of the different races as well as all of the different classes. So we're going to be doing a in-depth tutorial kind of talking about each of the different classes, and then I'm going to be kind of dividing things up a little bit differently. I'm going to be doing a tutorial specifically on new character creation, and then I will be doing a different tutorial that will be going over each of the different starting areas. I'll probably do one video per starting area, kind of going over the fun lore of the various areas, as well as just kind of talking about the different quests and give a bit of a summary for what you can be expecting when you pick each of these different starting races. So each of the different races do come with their own unique starting area as well as their own unique prologue, unless you choose the before the shadow tutorial, but I'll give that its own video, so we're not going to go too much into detail about the different starting areas and the stories, because I will give them their own unique video. So first race we're going to be talking about is Man. They are your standard human race. They have they're your pretty typical starting race. They're not as long-lived as elves, sturdy as dwarves, or resilient as hobbits. Men are renowned for their courage and resourcefulness. There's a ton of different options that you can pick for men. Men are not limited to any of the classes that are available within the game outside of Beornings. You can pick any class that you want. Some of the various races have class limitations that they can't play as, but we'll get into those as we talk about the different types of classes that are available. One of the things that I do want to talk about when it comes to this game is each race does have its own specific set of stat bonuses and as well as stat decreases. So one of the things that if you are playing a man, you do get a +1 might, as well as you get +5% incoming healing. So if you are wanting to look at your min-maxing part of things, one of the things that I would definitely recommend for a men, if you are a min-maxer, is to play men sort of as a tank, because you get +1 might, which is your primary stat that tanks will be using. So having high might is good, and just getting a +1 for a nice bonus there is good. Plus, if you are easily inspired, then you get +5% incoming healing, which means that if you are tanking, you will receive more healing. And 5%, that could mean the difference between life or death in a high intensity group capacity. So that is one reason why you would want to play men as a tank. However, I'm going to do this quick little disclaimer here. I want you guys to know that min-maxing is not a priority within Lord of the Rings Online. If you want to be a high tier raider, I'm going to have a guide to give some information about how you can min-max in terms of race and class combinations, but for the most part, it's pretty much just going to be race and role versus race and class. But I always have the mindset of don't try and min-max, just play what you want to play, enjoy the game, and have fun with it. So the next race that we're going to talk about is the High Elves. High Elves are my personal favorite race. They have some fun, unique animations. They have a really, really cool starting area in the Shadows of Angmar, which is this kind of fun, unique instance of where you get to play through the Battle of the Last Alliance. Again, I'll go into more detail with it when we get into the actual instance videos for the High Elves. And they have some really fun abilities. They will get the option to... they'll get a out-of-combat resurrection. So if you're playing like high-difficulty group content, High Elves are always going to be nice because you'll be able to have an out-of-combat resurrection with them. In terms of your min-maxers, they get -1 will, -2 fate, +4 maximum morale and morale regen, as well as some resistance. So the morale regen is a health regen, with them having a... -1 will, as well as -2 fate. You weren't really going to want to play them, if you're wanting to min-max, you aren't really going to want to play them as Rune-Keepers or Lore Masters, because they are the ones that do rely on will. So having a will reduction kind of makes it just slightly more difficult, but it is only 1, so it's not a big deal. Again, High Elves also don't have any class or race restrictions, so that's something nice to know, is that you don't have, is you can play basically any class outside of Beornings, but Beornings are their own beasts, so nobody that's not a Beorning can play a Beorning. So we'll get into that when we get down to them at the end. But if you're wanting to min-max, pretty much anything that's not a Minstrel, Rune-Keeper, or Lore Master is a good option. They don't have any agility or might hits, so you don't have to worry about that. They do have maximum morale regens, so they have a little bit more health. So honestly, I think playing something outside of a tank is also a good option for High Elves, because they have just a little bit of better survivability. So whether it's Mariner or Hunter or even Burglar, you have those options. Warden, you can do kind of whatever with. They're a funky tank, and I will get into those again as the last class, because there's a lot to talk about with those. In fact, I might even just be making more in-depth guide videos for the individual classes, just to make those easier, rather than going over each of the different classes here. I'll give kind of like an overview, but I will go and make individual videos on each class. So there's that. Stay tuned for those. All right, so that's High Elves. They're really fun. They're my personal favorite race. I really, really enjoy them. Next race that we are going to be talking about, no surprise here, is Durin's Folk, or the Dwarves. Dwarves are a really interesting race. Obviously, they are going to be your best 4 tanks, because they have +1 might, +1 vitality. They have -1 agility, so playing a dwarf hunter is going to be putting you at a pretty early disadvantage. But again, it's not a big deal, so it's not something that I would stress too much about. Lost Dwarf Kingdoms, -2 fate. But again, they get a ton of bonuses with their regen in combat, so they're going to be your best options for your tanks. And then one-handed axes, they get the use of one-handed axes regardless of what class you play, so that's just kind of a fun little roleplay option. Now, there are a few things to note with dwarves. Dwarves cannot play as a burglar, a lore master, or a mariner. So those are classes that are going to be restricted for them. However, you can play as a Rune-Keeper, a Warden, a Minstrel, Hunter, Guardian, Champion, Captain, and Brawler. So that's just one thing to note about Dwarves. Dwarves are going to be, again, your best options for tanks. The next race we're going to dive into, not really a ton to talk about them, but we'll get into, and that's okay. That's just because they're your good tanks for your min-maxers. The next thing to talk about with, there is one other thing actually I'm going to talk about with dwarves. Dwarves are also gender locked to male. You cannot play as a female dwarf, which is something that I find kind of interesting. Every other race has the option to switch to male or female, which is up here in the top left corner. But dwarves do not have that option. However, you are not appearance locked. So if you want to play a dwarf and you want to put them in a dress, more power to you. You can do that. The game just won't let you play them as a female, which I think is weird. I don't know why they do that, because Stout-Axes you can. And now we'll get into Stout-Axes. Stout-Axes are your secondary dwarf race. Wait, did the female even make a change? I've never actually made a Stout-Axe. Oh, I guess Stout-Axes are the same way. Male and female look the exact same. That's hilarious. Stout-Axes are a different version of dwarves. They were brought to ruin by the desire for the ring granted them by Sauron. Draws' folk doomed their descendants into an area of thraldom in the Black Land, so they are slaves in Mordor. I actually have never made a Stout-Axe before. I definitely do plan on trying them out. I think they have a really, really cool intro, is what I've heard. But they have +1 will, +1% combat mitigation, +1 shadow. They pretty much get stat bonuses into everything except vitality and fate. Vitality being a big thing for tanking. So honestly, I would not recommend playing a Stout-Axe as a tank. They do get an agility bonus. So if you are doing them, I would honestly recommend playing them as a hunter. Because they do get a agility bonus, so that's really nice. But they also do get a bonus towards will and might, so you could play them as a champion. You could play them in a Rune-Keeper position. I think they're pretty versatile for what you might want to do. They're also the only dwarf class that you can play a Burglar as, which I think is really cool. Stout-Axes are definitely going to be the preferred. They only cannot play a Lore Master as the only class restriction that the Stout-Axe will have, which, whatever, kind of silly, but it is what it is. Yeah, Stout-Axes, they're really cool. They're also a premium race, so that's one thing to note before we move on to the next premium race. Stout-Axes do cost Lotro points if you are going to play as a Stout-Axe. You do not get them as a free-to-play player, so for your first character, probably won't be playing as a Stout-Axe. If you are determined and you want to spend the money, go for it, enjoy it, have fun, do what you want to do with that. All the freedom and power to you playing as a Stout-Axe. Next race we're going to be talking about is River Hobbits. This is the secondary premium race that is available within the game. So again, they're a race that costs Lotro points. I apologize for all this loading. This is just part of Lotro. It takes a long time, especially for the River Hobbit one, because I give them a really, really cool background. But River Hobbits are they are the premium version of the Hobbits. Apparently, I've never made a River Hobbit. As you can see, I don't have it unlocked. I'll probably unlock it here, honestly, within the next couple of weeks, because that's what I want to do. But they're here. They have such a cool background available to them. So River Hobbits are the last of their kind remaining east of the Misty Mountains. River Hobbits are a lithe and sylvan folk steeped in wood lore and attuned to the mountains where they remain hidden. So they are quite different from the Hobbits, actually. They are not class locked at all. You can play whatever. If you're looking at min-maxing, they get improved agility. They get -1 will. As well as they get +4 maximum morale, +1% frost mitigation, and they get the use of daggers. So your two best class options, if you're looking at playing as a River Hobbit, you would want to play either Burglar or Hunter. They don't have any bonuses to Might or Vitality, but they do get a bit of a bonus to Morale, so they do pretty well for sustainability. So you could use them in a tank role if you're wanting to play Champion or Brawler or Guardian. They're not horrible tanks, but they're not great tanks either. For your min-maxers out there. I personally, though, would recommend playing either a Burglar or a Hobbit Hunter, if you are looking at playing a River Hobbit. So they also get a really cool intro. They start in a different area. I haven't actually seen it. Again, I'm gonna probably do a first impression video on it at some point. But that will be something to look at. For River Hobbits is they have a cool intro. I know you can see an eagle in them, so that is one thing to look forward to. So they do, because there's seclusion, they have -1 will, which gives you a deep bit of a stat decrease if you're playing Lore Master, Rune-Keeper, or Minstrel. So those are things to keep in mind as well. So just something to keep in mind for your river hobbits. Up next, we have your regular hobbits. This is back to a free-to-play race. They are pretty restricted in terms of classes. They can't play Captain, Mariner, or Rune-Keeper. They also have some really weird customization options. I'm not the biggest fan of the customization options for hobbits. I don't normally play a hobbit outside of like a crafting alt that I had on Glamdring. But some people do really enjoy them. I'm not gonna like say, oh, you're wrong for playing a hobbit. Some hobbits do look great. I just have never been able to make a hobbit look good. So hobbits are small size, which gives them -1 might, but they do get +1 vitality. So they have some weird choices there. They get some bonus non-combat regen, as well as +1 fear resistance and +1% shadow mitigation. Hobbits, they, with the -1 might, makes them kind of difficult to be an effective champion, but they can be used for like a guardian, because you're going to be building a butt ton of vitality. They might not overall be the best tank though, because not having might kind of does mitigate a lot of your damage that you might be doing in that situation. So I would recommend, if you are playing a hobbit, to run probably a burglar or hunter for the damage that you're going to be doing, while you don't have any necessary big damage buffs to the hobbits. You can basically kind of do a pretty good all-around DPS and healing outside it, but you can't really be the best tank. Again, that's just my own personal preference, or based on their starting stats, but you can make anything work. You are not strictly limited to saying, oh, well, hobbits get -1 might, so I'm not going to play them in raids. You can still be effective in raids as hobbits. This is just if you're wanting absolute min-maxing. Probably not going to want to take a hobbit into a raid, honestly. Next race is going to be the Elves. They're your basic elves. So the big difference between high elves and elves: high elves are your elves of the first age and like the really early stages. Elves are your probably coming in at the second age or the third age. So elves, Sorrow of the Firstborn, they get -2 maximum morale and -0.48 combat morale regen, so they are not going to be a good tank. However, they get +1 agility, they get -2 fate, and then they get +1% disease and poison resistance. But since they have the maximum morale, you're not really going to want to take them as a tank. If you are planning on playing a tank, elf is not going to be your best option. They also are locked out of Captain and Mariner, but they can play every other class out there. Mainly then, since you're not really going to want to recommend playing a tank, then I would recommend playing Burglar, Hunter, or Lore Master, Minstrel, and Rune-Keeper. I've played an Elf Rune-Keeper up to level 54, and it was super fun. So they work really, really great there. So I would definitely recommend Elf Rune-Keeper if that's something you might be interested in, if you're kind of a magic-based player, but we'll get into that in just a little moment. And then the final race, which will also be the first for our classes, is the Beorning. Beornings are descendants from skin changers. So if you've watched The Hobbit, there is Beorn, or if you've read The Hobbit, skin changers. They have the ability to turn into a bear. Beornings can only play Beornings. Big surprise. They are a crazy class race combination. They pretty much can fulfill any role. They can be a tank, they can be a healer, and they can DPS. They are the biggest all-around class, but they can be a little bit more difficult to play. I'm not going to go into too much detail again about the classes, because I'm going to be making individual class guides as time goes on, because there's just a lot to break down for every single one of these classes. But Beornings will be able to fulfill any role. They shift back and forth between human form and bear form, and that is really, really, really freaking cool. They're super fun to play, honestly. Enjoy them a lot, and they do get the ability to make honey cakes. You get to make, like, Beorning honey cakes is part of the shtick for playing a Beorning, which is really cool. So that pretty much summarizes all of the different races and some of the bonuses that you get for them. And then we're going to just very, very briefly talk about each of the classes. I'm going to go through and put like timestamps for each of these. So that way, if you're like, well, I'm not interested in any of these, you can kind of skip around and pick and choose what you want. So I hope that helps. If you guys have any tips on wanting to make this better, then when I probably will do another new player guide as big changes happen to the game, you can let me know down in the comments, but please keep them constructive. Don't just say, oh, you suck at talking about things, because that's not going to be helpful. Anyways, classes. First class is Burglar. Burglars are going to be your pretty typical stealth class. They run either a DPS or a support role. They work really well for debuffs, as well as they have various abilities that can trigger certain maneuvers that are only used in parties. So any party would be good to have a Burglar in there somewhere. Highly recommend having a Burglar if you're working on playing with a group. That's really pretty much summarizes the Burglar. They honestly have really cool skills, and I do really enjoy them. I've been playing a Burglar on Peregrine as my main right now, and it's been super fun. Next, we have Brawler. Brawlers are either DPS or they are tank. They are inspired through Helm, Hammer Hand, and he would take to the battlefield barehanded, and so that's what Brawlers do. They go in, fists out, and they like to punch stuff. They're super fun. I've been playing a Brawler for our maximum difficulty challenge on the Angmar Legendary server, and I really enjoy it. One of my favorite classes to play. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. I think they personally play better as a DPS, but they can also do pretty decent as a tank. I always recommend, if you are having a Brawler, to probably have a secondary tank as well, just to help, because the Brawlers aren't always your best tanks, but they aren't necessarily your worst tanks either. So there's that. That's the Brawler. The one thing to note about the Brawler, they are a premium class, so they do cost low turbo points in order to play. So if this is your first character, I wouldn't recommend spending the money on the Brawler, because you don't want to spend the money and then decide the game's not for you, and now you've just wasted money. The next class is Captain. Captains are one of the coolest and weirdest classes out there. They are a melee class, but they are focused around support. They are a buffing class. They can summon allies that can also do healing or various buffs. They can also debuff some enemies. Captains are honestly one of the coolest support classes out there, because of the fact that they're such a funky support class. And so if you're playing in a group setting, Captains are going to be a absolutely wonderful class to have. They also do really good solo. If you're wanting one of the best Captain players out there, recommend Gantorin. He probably has the most amount of knowledge when it comes to Captain, because he's leveled the Captain all the way to Cap. So I definitely would recommend checking him out for more Captain information. Next class is Champion. They are probably the easiest class to pick up and play, if not the second easiest in comparison to Hunter. They can be a DPS, or they can also tank a little bit. They're slashy sword guys. You specialize in either single target DPS, AoE DPS, or tanking. My best recommendation is to play them as a DPS. I think they're really fun to play in that regard as a DPS. But I did want to just give that as an option for everybody, that you can play them in those two main roles. They're really fun. They're really simple. If you're a new player and you want to play a melee guy who does a ton of damage, Champion is your way to go. Up next, we have Guardian. Guardian is going to be your most successful tank outside of probably the Beorning. They are built to be a tank. They wear heavy armor. They have defensive skills. You can run Guardians as a DPS. if you would like. You can customize them in a very specific way, but that's going to be something where I will go over that in more detail in the class guide. But they use either a sword and shield, or you would want to run them with a two-handed weapon. Yeah, that pretty much summarizes them. There's not really much more to talk about with them outside of they're big, they're bulky, they know how to take a hit. Up next is Hunter. Hunter, if you want to be Legolas, Hunter is the way to go. They're a DPS. They can also be used as a support. They have a one of their other lines utilizes traps, so you can kind of use a lot of crowd control. I haven't seen too much success with that particular discipline in the hunters that I've played, but I've also only utilized hunters in a solo capacity. I've never actually played them in a group, so that is something to take in mind as well. I'll go over it again in more detail in those class guides. But hunters, they're also super simple to pick up. If you are a new player and you want to shoot things and you want a class that's easy to understand, hunters are very easy to understand. They're one of the easiest classes to pick up and play. Super fun, highly recommend them. The next class is Lore Master. Lore Masters are going to be your typical druid type classes. They utilize animal companions to either do damage or provide additional support. I apologize for my breaks. My throat's getting dry from 25 minutes of yapping. But Lore Masters are super fun. I would recommend playing them. You can use them as a damage or support role. And so that's a really fun way to play with them. I've enjoyed every time that I've picked up a Lore Master, even for just a brief period of time. Next up, we have Mariner. They are the second premium class that you have to spend low turo points on. They're honestly kind of a tough class to pick up and play. They are run at either DPS or a weird support kind of thing. I'm not too familiar with the Mariners. I only just started playing a Mariner for the first time recently. But they're a fun class to play. They have a ton of different options for playing them well, due just to the innate nature that they have to be supportive as well as do damage. Minstrels are your bard type classes. They're some of your best healers out there, but you can run them as a DPS. They do actually some crazy high damage. So if you're wanting to do damage or healer, Minstrels are the way to go. Minstrel was actually my first class that I ever played, so that was really fun. They're really great in a damage capacity, as well as they do really well in solo play. So I would definitely recommend a Minstrel if you're looking at wanting to be both damage and healer, so you can kind of pivot back and forth. And then up next is Rune-Keeper, which is my personal favorite class. This one I put a lot on par with the Minstrel. They do a ton of really, really good DPS, as well as they do a ton of really, really good healing. They're pretty easy to understand. I'm going to remake my Rune-Keeper guide, but I already do have a Rune-Keeper guide that's out there. I might redo it. I actually don't know. Don't quote me on that. But that's here, Rune-Keepers. They are a really, really cool class. Super fun. They use magic, so if you like spellcasters or mage type builds, this is definitely a class for you. And the last class is Warden. Wardens, for you sweats out there who like to do flashy mechanical plays and stuff like that, Wardens are the way to go. They have a primary gimmick that is called the Gambit function, which is they utilize various combinations of abilities, so it requires a lot of understanding how those abilities all chain together, both to maximize your damage or to maximize your tanking. They work really good either as a tank or as a DPS. Those are the two ways that you are going to want to play the Warden, either as tank or DPS. I apologize if my audio balancing was really bad. If I need to re-record this, I will. But we'll see. So, there's that. Wardens. They're crazy. They're difficult. I would not recommend a Warden for a new player, because there's a lot to think about, a lot to remember, and they can be really tough to pick up and play. So, yeah. Thank you guys so much. This was I know a big yap. We talked about a lot of different things for classes and races. Again, I'm going to have everything time-stamped so that way you can watch it and kind of skip around to anything that might catch your eye as you are going through and playing the game. Because I know you can boot up this screen, see this, and suddenly you're like, holy crap, there's a ton of information here, and I want to try and make it a little bit more digestible. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope this is a really nice guide. Make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel so you can see more guides as they come out, because we're going to be talking about each of the different starting areas and what you can be expecting there for the type of storyline that you will be starting out with, as well as just kind of different ways to explore the different starting areas, because they can be kind of difficult to understand. But that'll be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks again to all of my Ko-Fi supporters. You were the ones who helped to keep this channel up and running and make it possible. If you would like to financially support the channel, there's a link to that down in the description below. But with that, that will be the end of this video. You are loved, you are valued, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and we will see you out there in Middle-earth, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.